How often have you felt restricted to spiritual practices that often seem outdated and of little relevance in today's world? Are you discouraged to express your own creative talents and develop spiritual practices that are uniquely you? The Liturgical Rebels podcast is for people like you who want to reimagine and reconstruct their faith and spiritual practices. It's for those who want to reshape belief and journey closer to God's wholeness with peace, justice, and flourishing, not just for themselves, but for the earth and all its inhabitants.
Welcome to Liturgical Rebels. This week we are recasting a discussion from August 2024 between Christine and Tom about their passion for Celtic spirituality and its impact on their lives. They share personal experiences with the Celtic tradition, including visits to Holy Island and Iona, and the challenges they faced in building a Celtic-style retreat here in the Pacific Northwest. They highlight their love for the presence of God in all aspects of life and the importance of hospitality, community, and living lightly on the earth. We hope you enjoyed this week's Repodcast.
It really is a delight to have the two of us together here, Tom, on the Liturgical Rebels podcast, and particularly to be talking about something, Celtic spirituality, that has really been a passion for us. In fact, you were the one that stirred the passion in me because you gave me a book called Celtic Fire even before we were married, I think on my birthday before we were married. And then you took me to to Iona on our honeymoon, and I fell in love with the place just as you have. And we've been there a number of times, but we've also had a chance to go to some of the other sites, to Holy Island, to Glendalough, to Cloyne-McNoise, and just each time, I think, cementing our delight in the Celtic tradition. So, Tom, I would like you to tell me a little bit about your history with the Celtic tradition and why it has become so important for you.
Well, my background is a little different than yours. I was not raised in a church home. I became a Christian just as I was leaving high school, and a more progressive evangelical believer. But I had many questions about that particular view of faith, and one of them was, how do we connect our Christian faith to our American culture? And that led me to go to Iona, which is one of the beginning places for Christian faith outside of Catholic culture and tradition, and the earliest of Western culture.
And so it was there that you ignited your interest in the Celtic spirituality?
That was the beginning place because I discovered that in the early church that was in Britain and Ireland, they were very deeply committed to the ways of Jesus, but that initially didn't require going to a church building for weekly services and going about your life as usual. It was really a commitment to a radical new way of life that was centered in a vibrant living community with other people of faith in Jesus Christ, but a new way of being where they took more time to be present to neighbors, people that they'd never known before, and instead of going to a church in their homes and in their relational networks where they lived, they took seriously the teachings of Jesus to be there as deeply compassionate people for their neighbors who were struggling with issues of all kinds.
Well, why Iona as the primary focus of this form of spirituality? What is it that has drawn you personally back to it so many times over the last 40 years, I think, because it's not exactly an easy place to get to.
No, it's not an easy place to get to, but it's worth the troubles for those that would like to learn more about a way of faith that is more out of a Protestant tradition, that really called people to a new way of living, not just a request to go to church on a weekly basis.
Well, your passion for Celtic spirituality certainly ignited mine. And when we were married, I was struggling with the dualistic approach to faith that I'd grown up with. And Celtic spirituality certainly was like a breath of fresh air. And so I just wanted to list a few of the characteristics that I've been drawn to over the years. Firstly, it is incarnational with an intense sense of the presence of God. Yes. I love one of the authors that I've read says that the Celts were described as God-intoxicated people whose lives were embraced on all sides by the divine being. And I think I would love it if sometimes somebody would describe me as a God-intoxicated being. Have you ever had them do that, love?
I haven't, but for me, it's more of a God invested person who is finding the meaning of that for all areas of life, not just religious participation.
Okay. Well, and I think that is certainly something that I enjoyed too, because it was as though the presence of Christ was physically roving around their lives. God was treated with awe and reverence and wonder, but was essentially a human figure to them, intimately involved in all of creation and engaged in every aspect of life. And I particularly like the fact that they saw creation as translucent, with the glory of God shining through it, and believing that creation responded to the creative presence of God and God's sustaining love.
For me, in addition to what you've just described, it was a call to a new way of being that was not just a carbon copy of the culture at that time, but a new way of relating to one another, to neighbors, that was deeply rooted in a commitment to Jesus Christ as a new figure in understanding serious faith.
Well, and I think an aspect of it that really inspired both of us was the importance of hospitality. I know it's something that we've practiced throughout our marriage because of that shared interest. And for the Celts, hospitality was seen as opening a door to the kingdom and welcoming Jesus into their midst. And I think that that's something that we've really experienced over the years of our marriage.
And where that's a little different for me as an American is that churches encourage a kind of hospitality that's fairly narrow and limited to people who are part of the same racial and class society. And the call to Jesus followers is to share faith with people of all kinds of race and culture and backgrounds and meet our sisters and brothers who are followers of Jesus.
Well, and I think we've certainly shared hospitality with a broad range of people over the years as well. I think that, sorry, yes.
No, I couldn't agree more. We have people that we've enjoyed having in our home from all kinds of racial and cultural backgrounds, and we've learned a lot from very young people and older people about what it means to follow Jesus in times like this.
Well, and the ones that really come to mind when we talk about this is the two young men that came to our door one day and said to us, "Can we sleep in your backyard?" And they'd read about us on a site for intentional community, and they were trying to get up to Canada, and they weren't allowed up, so they needed a place to stay for what they thought would be just a few days. And we said, "Oh, no, you can't sleep in our backyard, but we have a space, an empty apartment at the moment," and they slept down there for a few days. And then it looked as though we were getting people into the apartment, but they were going to be here for a lot longer. And they ended up actually sleeping up in our tower room for almost a year.
I remember that.
It was quite an experience, wasn't it? And they did all kinds of wonderful things around the house for us.
Yes.
And I remember often referred to them as our angels unaware. And it just had a very Celtic kind of flavor to it, that interaction.
Well, our house has been dedicated. It's an ancient house for the west coast of Seattle that is actually has 3 floors, built in 1910. And we have an apartment above us, an apartment below us, and people that join us do it on the condition that they have a meal with us once a week with a little faith reflection and gardening with us. And we've learned so much, particularly from younger people that have often been a part of the Mustard Seed House.
Well, and of course, one of the other aspects of Celtic spirituality is that it was very much community-based, because it revolved not around a parish church, but around the monastery where people lived together and worked together and interacted together. And I think that's part of what inspired us to move in the direction of community living. And of course, there was another, before we were married, actually, you purchased 40 acres up on Holy Island, north of Seattle, with the intention of building a Celtic-style retreat site. So tell us a bit about that dream and your intentions for the land.
That dream was quite a while ago. What was the year that we did that?
Well, you bought it in 1989.
1989, and I took some resources from some books that I was writing, and we purchased that with the intent of creating a place that captured the Celtic way of living and worshiping, where we would host people every summer for a long weekend, where we would camp together, we would pray together, and we even found a musician here in Seattle that specialized in music that was very similar to what the Celtic Church was playing. And
well, what you're referring to are the Celtic retreats that we did on the land before it had any form of development at
That's
all.
Right.
And we would go out there. We did it for 25 years. And we would go out there, as you said, and we'd spend a long weekend and take a lot of time setting things up. And then, of course, doing a program out there.
And we were in the process during that whole period of building 3 construction projects for living, for worshiping, in a circle. And we actually got one building up and almost finished when we had trouble with vandals.
Oh, it was devastating.
Yeah, when the vandals came, and not once but twice, they did significant damage to the building. And at that point, I questioned, as we were getting older, how much time we had left in our hourglass to complete this project. And that led us to actually deed it over to a young friend of ours who was a pastor at the time.
Well, to the organization that he was setting up.
That's right. And tell us about that organization.
Well, the organization was called Circlewood, and actually it was really Mustard Seed Associates, which was the organization that we'd originally set up and that had been involved with the land, but they rebranded it as Circlewood, and they have worked on the same building that we started. And in fact, by the end of this year, they expect that it will be finished and will be dedicated and will be in use. And I think we're very excitedly looking forward to that. But yes, it was a challenge for us to have had that happen.
And it was hard to let go, though they keep us in touch and they invite us to their gatherings. But they're moving ahead in a remarkable way, and they have plans to build other structures, and they have become a center for Christian concern about environmental issues, and they are a site we challenge you to visit. What is the official name?
Yeah, Circlewood.
Circlewood. And I don't have the
No, it's fine. We can put that information in the show notes at the end of of this.
And all of that to say, I think in these days, young people everywhere are very concerned about the environmental future. Older people are a little slower catching on, but people of faith need to be in the front edge of working to see the good use of God's beautiful creation in a time where we're facing all kinds of new challenges environmentally, but also politically and in relationship to contrasting cultures.
Well, and that's very in keeping, of course, with the vision that we had, and particularly the love of creation, which was so central to Celtic spirituality. As you were talking, one of the things I was reminded of is that the Celtic Christians often called themselves guests of the world and lived with that belief that they were meant to live lightly on the earth and that they weren't meant to in any way destroy the earth, and they were meant to interact with it in a beautiful way. And I think that's one of the things that we've seen as we've spent time on the land, wouldn't you say?
Yes, as we've spent time on the land and visiting the Celtic centers in Europe, we find people who are deeply concerned as a part of their Christian faith to celebrate the beauty of God's creation and find ways to enrich this world for the benefit of all that live here.
I think that that's one of the things that I continue to find inspiring about the Celtic spiritual focus. And so what about now, Tom? In what ways does this tradition still impact your life?
Well, here in our house, Mustard Seed House here in Seattle, we have a beautiful garden that you are making more lovely every day. We grow a lot of our own food with the participation of the people live upstairs and downstairs as a part of our community. We share that food together with them, with neighbors, and we experience a little bit of the flavor of the Celtic lifestyle with a weekly time of prayer and reflection, taking turns of going around and sharing a bit of our faith experience and our faith experience as it relates to that larger natural world, and including taking trips to the Celtic retreat site that is rapidly building and growing into what we had hoped it would become.
In fact, I think in some ways more than we'd hoped it would become.
That's true.
Yeah. What else would you like to share with us about Celtic spirituality?
Well, I think it's important for all of us who are followers of Jesus, whether we're Catholic, Protestant, evangelicals, is to rediscover following Christ is something that transcends American culture, Western culture, showing up occasionally on the weekends to go to a church building. It's a call to a more radical whole life faith, where we are much more engaged with one another in communities of faith, and we're also much more engaged in the protection and celebration of our beautiful natural world.
That sounds a very beautiful way to sum this up, I think. Thank you for being a part of it with me.
Thank you for letting me be a part of Liturgical Rebels. I'm so impressed by what you're doing. Glad to be with you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this discussion of Celtic spirituality with Tom and Christine Sine. Our next Repodcast will be an interview with Jeff Johnson, whose music spans 40 years of over 50 solo and collaborative releases, featuring progressive rock, jazz, new age, contemporary Celtic, and contemplative worship stylizations. He's collaborated with such diverse artists as Irish flutist Brian Dunning, jazz bassist Dave Friesen, classical vocalist Janet Marie Chattal, and guitar virtuoso Phil Kagi. He regularly leads a contemplative worship service featuring recordings from the Psalms, music, and silent prayer called the Selah service at churches and retreats. He and Christine discuss his collaborations with other artists and the significance of wonder and creativity. We hope you'll join us.